Namaskar, good evening and welcome to World Today. My name is Mark Lynn, and on the show this evening, well, Omicron's mutations, vaccine efficacy and all those sort of questions related to it. Also, the medical implications of the Pac-Man-like xenobot that is replicating itself. But first, let's begin with the headlines. Aviation industry around the world voices concern on travel restrictions due to Omicron, says that the airlines will be hit badly if the peak December travel is restricted, causing significant traumas in global aviation. Omicron is detected in around 20 countries worldwide. The spread likely began before the virus was detected, so several countries have issued strict guidelines on international travel. Three teenage students killed and 8 others injured, including a teacher, in a high school shooting in the U.S. state of Michigan. The 15-year-old shooter is arrested and has invoked the right to not speak and has also asked for an attorney. Xiomara Castro is the first woman to become president of Honduras. She's set to become the president, and Hondurasans they have voted for this leftist leader, who's also the wife of the former president Manuel Zelaya. Scientists find that the world's first living robots can replicate, and the finding has huge implications for the study of stem cell research and organ replication. It could be a boon to medical science. Let's begin with the big news. Well, France has registered about 47,000 new confirmed COVID-19 cases over the past 24 hours, the highest one-day tally since April at the height of the third wave of the pandemic. The latest data will push the cumulative total of cases in France since the start of the pandemic to 7.67 million, and the 7-day moving average of the new infections well over 32,000. Now, during the third wave in the spring, the 7-day average briefly rose to 42,000. On the 8th of April, France had recorded nearly 85,000 COVID-19 infections. Authorities say the vast majority of the COVID-19 patients now in the hospital have not been vaccinated, and about 75% of the French population has already been vaccinated. Meanwhile, France's health regulator on Tuesday backed vaccinating fragile children aged between 5 and 11 against COVID-19 if they were at a risk of developing a serious form of the disease or if they lived with vulnerable people. Inoculating children and young people who can unwittingly transmit COVID-19 to others is considered a critical step towards taming the pandemic. In Germany and the Netherlands, kids now account for a majority of the cases. The U.S. infections expert, the disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, has said that it's difficult to ascertain whether the COVID-19 variant Omicron will lead to severe disease. And he said that preliminary information from South Africa has indicated that it does not do so. It does not have any unusual symptoms. Fauci was speaking during a White House COVID task force virtual briefing, and Anthony Fauci, talking about the grave situation in South Africa, said that the South African countries have not adequately utilized the vaccine doses that have been given to them.
One of the frustrating aspects of this is that the logistic capability of getting vaccines into people's arms in Southern African countries and in other low and middle income countries is really very difficult. And in fact, many of the doses that have been shipped have not been used, and other African countries on the African continent have actually told us not to ship any more vaccine because they have not been able to adequately utilize it.
As COVID-19 ravages across the world, Greece's lawmakers are expected to mandate COVID-19 vaccination for people above 60 years of age. The country may impose a fine of 100 euros to the to these aged people and who refuse to get vaccinated against COVID-19. The measure is still to be put to a parliamentary vote. Greece's Prime Minister, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, has said that he's informed this decision, and he said that the fined money will be going now towards healthcare system in the country. Those people are going to be fined. And Greece has over 9,38,000 cases of the disease, with the death toll standing above 18,000. Well, Brazil has detected 2 cases of Omicron variant of COVID-19, the first such in Latin America. The Brazilian health regulator, Anvisa, has said that a traveler arriving from Sao Paulo from South Africa and his wife, who had not traveled, both tested positive for the new variant, adding to concerns of the global Omicron spread before recent travel bans went into effect. The health regulator further said that the samples will be sent for a second confirmatory analysis. Brazil was among one of the world's most affected countries by this disease, by COVID that is, and Brazil has more than 2,20,00,000 cases of COVID-19, with fatalities crossing 6,14,000. The Netherlands detected the Omicron, the new variant of COVID-19, in 14 people. The National Institute of Public Health said that at least 14 people on flights from Johannesburg and Cape Town arrived at Amsterdam's Schiphol airport on November 26, carrying the new variant. Dutch authorities are also seeking to contact trace and test more than 5,000 people, other passengers who had traveled from South Africa, Botswana, Eswatini, also Lesotho, Mozambique, Namibia, and also Zimbabwe. So the Netherlands has already imposed tougher measures to stem the growing surge in cases. The country's COVID-19 cases stand above 26,43,000, and the fatalities have crossed 19,000. The Ecuadorian President, Guillermo Lasso, has announced entry restrictions to travelers due to the new Omicron coronavirus strain. According to the new travel restrictions, any person traveling from or through South Africa, where the Omicron strain was first detected, Botswana, Egypt, Mozambique, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, Eswatini, and Namibia, will not be allowed to enter the country. And with the announcement, now Ecuador joins other countries across the globe in restricting the travel in response to the Omicron strain. Ecuador has more than 5,26,000 cases of COVID-19, with fatalities crossing 33,500. So those are the figures. Well, the big fear is for the airline industry, and the fear is a slack holiday season, because Christmas and New Year season, that's usually the peak season for airlines around the world. And this time, Omicron is threatening to ground any chances of a recovery.
Airline bosses voiced concern on Tuesday that travel restrictions linked to the emergence of the Omicron variant of the coronavirus risked blowing the industry recovery off course. The strongest warning came from Emirates airline president Tim Clark, who said a major hit to the peak December travel season would cause significant traumas in the global aviation business. The discovery of the Omicron variant, first reported in southern Africa last week, dealt a blow to the industry just as it had recovery in its sights, especially following the easing of US-bound travel earlier in November. Multiple countries, including Japan, the United States, Britain, and Israel, have imposed travel curbs in order to slow the spread of the new variant, which, it is feared, could prove more resistant to vaccines. The next few weeks, the run-up to Christmas and the New Year holiday season, would prove critical for the airline industry as scientists assess the risks.
So I would say probably by the end of December, we'll have a much clearer position. But in that time, December is a very important month for the air travel business. And if that is lost, or the winter is lost to a lot of carriers, there will be significant traumas in the business, certainly the aviation business and the periphery.
British budget airline EasyJet also spoke of a softening in demand in recent weeks, as the resurgence of the virus in parts of continental Europe prompted customers to rethink city break plans. Shares of US travel and leisure companies dropped, tracking a fall in global shares. Moderna's head told Financial Times that COVID-19 vaccines are unlikely to be as effective against the Omicron variant of the coronavirus as they have been previously. US carriers Alaska Air Group, American Airlines, Southwest Airlines, Delta Airlines, American Airlines, Spirit Airlines and JetBlue Airways declined between 2.1% and 3.4% pre-market. But many experts believe that the show will go on, and the nations and the people will see this variant off too.
Well, again, we think that this Omicron is one of what will probably be a number of variants that will emerge and have already begun to emerge. Think of Delta as the first variant that we dealt with in 2021. Omicron will deal with between now and probably early 2022. There may be other variants to come along, but we think over time, people will learn to accept the fact that there will be new variants, there will be new vaccines, and people will simply have to continue to get vaccinated against new variants, and that over time, that will not stop people from going to restaurants, it will not stop people from going to hotels and getting on airplanes.
The World Health Organization warned on Monday that the mutated Omicron coronavirus variant is likely to spread internationally and poses a very high risk of infection surges and could have severe consequences in some places. Expert analysis notwithstanding, the next few days will be crucial to see whether it has a similar devastating effect on public health. But the emergence of a new variant and accompanying comments have spooked investors, and the damning effects on investor confidence is already being felt. DD India.
Yes, indeed. And well, the docking of the Europa passenger liner in Cape Town on Tuesday, that was meant to be a ribbon-cutting celebration because it's the official start of the cruise ship season in South Africa, which is now beginning to see its summer. And that's the top tourist season for them. And the first also since the COVID-19 pandemic hit was going to be an opening up. But what happened? It was quite different. Take a look.
This docking of the Europa passenger liner in Cape Town on Tuesday was supposed to be a ribbon-cutting celebration to mark the official start of the first cruise ship season since the pandemic. Instead, some passengers will now disembark and be tested for the new Omicron coronavirus variant before flying straight home. As international travel curbs on southern Africa, where the variant was first identified, have blown expectations of a bumper tourist season out of the water. Owned by German-based travel company TUI Group, the ship carrying hundreds of passengers and crew was sailing from Namibia to Cape Town when news of Omicron broke and raised the possibility that the ship could be rerouted. The multi-story luxury liner is the first to dock at Cape Town since South Africa imposed a total ban on all cruise ships entering local ports in March 2020. A succession of tough lockdown curbs has hammered the local tourism sector dependent on foreign tourists. The ship was originally meant to stay in port till the 2nd of December before departing, with the itinerary including visits to attractions like Table Mountain and apartheid-era prison Robben Island, where former President Nelson Mandela was incarcerated. The summer season is vital for Cape Town, which officials say has lost an estimated 75,000 tourism jobs in the pandemic. Now travel restrictions from the European Union, the UK, the US, due to Omicron, designated a variant of concern by the World Health Organization, have seen the region's three biggest markets cut off. Bureau Report, DD India.
And we have with us Dr. Sunil Kumar Raina, Advisor, World Health Network and COVID Action Group, and Professor and Head of the Community Medicine Government Medical College, Himachal Pradesh, joining us to throw light on this situation. Dr. Raina, is it normal for any variant to have 32 mutations on the spike protein in a natural way?
First, thanks, Mark, for having me on the show. You can expect the unexpected in a pandemic, because once the numbers start rising, the multiplications happen a lot of times. And when a virus multiplies a lot of times, there is a chance that the mutations may happen which are not expected ordinarily. There are mutations which will be harmful to the virus and good for the human, and then there are mutations which will be good for the virus but bad for the human. Now, having a large number of mutations, the ones like the ones we find in Omicron, 32, tells us that it's a more fitter virus, and this is not a very normally expected thing. It doesn't generally happen very frequently, that we have a mutation where we have a viral strain which has this number of mutations, this huge number of mutations. We don't expect it to happen daily. This is once in a blue moon, even as far as viral mutations are concerned.
So there has been research going on, since COVID came in, and after all, after the mRNA vaccines were put out, to see how the spike protein can change, and a lot of laboratory research has been going on, and even one research had found, had instigated the creation of 20 different mutations on the spike protein. So, I mean, my question is it possible that, some of this kind of research may have actually caused a new virus to have emerged?
Look,
I mean, if there's a lab leak theory for the origin of the virus, I'm asking you whether there's a lab leak theory now for the mutation of the virus.
That's where I was pointing to.
Yeah,
there are two things that happen during a pandemic. One is what happens within the laboratory, and second is what happens in the field. So experimentation happens within the laboratory, which may leak and lead to an infectious state. And experimentation naturally happens in the field as well. Now, at this point in time, you need to realize that there are two things happening simultaneously. One is that our numbers are still high across the world. We have not touched zero as far as the virus is concerned. And at the same point in time, our vaccination is not 100%. So we don't have a relationship wherein we have achieved 100% vaccination and therefore made a population which is immune. And at the same point of time, we have a population which is still getting infected. So whether there is a natural experimentation occurring within the virus itself because of the combination of the two, or whether there is a lab leak which has happened and led to this mutation, it's very difficult to say at this point in time. We will need more and more investigations into this pandemic. But expecting a lab leak to happen in one particular place and leading to a pandemic situation is something that I don't agree to it. Once you have a lab leak, it is more widespread or is likely to be found at more than one place. If more than one place is experimenting with the same type of viral strain at a given point in time.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe some protocols were missed in, in this particular case, and it may not have actually begun in South Africa. As we can see, that 20 countries already have it. I mean, the fact is that they trace their origin to people who have come in from the southern African countries over the period of time. But you never know. I mean, perhaps over a period of time, you might find that, this virus has been around for longer than we have actually taken time to discover it. But the point is that of these this virus and its efficacy on the vaccines that we've already taken, because the majority of the world has now taken the mRNA vaccine, which basically hits the spike protein. But if the spike protein has changed in nature, does the vaccine work?
Look, most of the vaccines that are around at this point in time in the public domain claim that they are effective as far as this variant is concerned.
Yes.
The exact response to the variant will be known over a period of time. As I said, at this point in time, we have very limited data available with us, very limited observations available with us. And most of this data has come from a country which is not high on vaccination. It's a country which is not doing very well as far as vaccination is concerned. So really understanding the role of vaccines or how exactly vaccines respond to this particular variant is slightly premature as far as data is concerned. But probably the one key takeaway from this particular strain is, or one key takeaway from here is that relying on a single strategy of vaccine as a tool to mitigate the impact of this pandemic may not be the correct way to handle it.
Okay.
We will need to identify more than one single tool to deal with this pandemic. Strains like this may come up every now and then, and they will continue to bother us. So we need to identify more than one strategy. Maybe we need to go to the basics, identify the precautionary principle, and to realize the fact that infection anywhere in the world is going to be infection everywhere.
Sure. So you're talking about the precautionary aspects, but let's move to beyond. I mean, the vaccination has certain technologies in which it prevents the virus from taking root. There is also the cure. I mean, once the virus has come in, we can start curing it. I mean, earlier COVID was not being, we didn't know how to cure it. But perhaps over time, have we developed, antivirals that can actually help in the cure of COVID, and that would probably be, helpful?
Probably the problem with pandemics is not just about how we deal with an individual patient. The problem with pandemics is that every time a pandemic comes or an outbreak of large level comes, we have a huge number of patients. And these huge number of patients tend to overcome our supplies as far as hospitals are concerned, infrastructure is concerned, patient care is concerned, doctor availability is concerned. So identifying a single patient and trying to treat him, giving him the best possible care is easy. But once the numbers start swelling up, you always think that most of these things are compromised. So maybe these antivirals will work when we are dealing with a single patient or two patients or three patients at one point in time. But if we are expecting a surge in the patients, then we may have problems. Because there is diversity in healthcare across the world. There is diversity in healthcare across nations itself, within nations itself, within states. So the availability of the best protocols may not be present at all places. So you need to take care of the fact that you may not have the advantage available with you at all times. So the best way to fight it out is to be at a precautionary level, take precautions and avoid it as far as possible.
So this is SARS-CoV-2, right? I mean, that's what COVID is. Now, SARS-CoV-1 disappeared. It didn't mutate into hundreds of forms. And also now we know that SARS-CoV-2 seems to be mutating quite a lot. And of these mutations also, some of them have fizzled out, like Lambda has fizzled out. Some of the others have fizzled out. Even the first form of SARS-CoV-2 probably doesn't exist anymore. Delta is the most prominent form, and now we have Omicron. So, I mean, judging by the way it's behaving, is this an unusual virus compared to the other ones that its ancestors?
Mark, this is a very important question, and this is something that I have wanted to answer. Now, when we compare it to SARS-CoV-1 or the SARS-1 which happened around 2003, 2004, we were talking of a world which has not crossed that critical threshold travel limit. I always talk of this, that over a period of time in the last 15, 20 years, what has happened is that travel has grown enormously across the world. And we have sort of shrunk into a global village now. And that travel has made it possible that virus from one place travels much faster than it would maybe 20 years back. And that is primarily, to my understanding, that is the primary reason why earlier pandemics did not move out to the same extent that this pandemic did, barring probably the Spanish flu of 1918. And because of the fact that at that point in time we had the war, people or the soldiers moving from one place to another through the sea route. So if the travel is curtailed or the travel is limited, there is a chance that this pandemic will end too. So that's probably the way to fight it out. Reduce the amount of contact that happens between individuals through travel. That's the way to end it. That's something that happened in SARS-CoV-1. We didn't have this amount of travel. The criticality of travel was crossed maybe around 2007-8, and that's where from the problems have started of a pandemic of this magnitude cropping up every now and then.
Well, you're a doctor, and obviously you look at things that way, but you know, economists we've spoken to seem to think that the economy is just as important. And you know, I mean, you can't shut down everything and then people's livelihoods go into a problem. There may not be enough money running a in circulation for people to make their livelihoods, and it's all going to be just a negative spiral from there. That's what the aviation industry is talking about. That's what our story talked about. So, I mean, is there a balance that your compromise formula that you can come to?
That's again a very good question. Fortunately, I have had the contact of some of the best economists that we have in the world dealing with this pandemic. And what I learned from them is that reducing the numbers, putting it at a level wherein you can open up as early as possible is the key to economy. If you look at economies across the world in the last 1.5 years, the best performing economy has been New Zealand, a smaller country, but it has been doing very well as far as economy is concerned. It has lower death rate. It doesn't have the same death rate that we have across the world. It has lower number of cases, and it is growing much better than entire Europe if you take a comparison with Europe. So reducing the numbers, being able to control the death rate, reducing the mortality is also a way to open up much earlier. You look at it this way. If you are going into a yo-yo sort of a lockdown or yo-yo sort of a closure and opening up, you have a higher chance that you will jeopardize the economy for a longer period of time. But if you are doing it for once and implementing it in a very stricter, stringent manner, you have a chance that after you implement it, you will open up economy fully well. That's something that New Zealand did. Australia did it for a large period of time. But they again compromised in the last stages. New Zealand compromised when it was about their bikers gang, which moved around and started spreading the infection. Australia had similar problems. So probably sticking to the basics, using the restrictions will open up economy as well. It is not a compromise. There is no compromise between livelihood and the pandemic. You have to ensure that you are able to go together and ensure that you impose good restrictions, for a very short duration of time and are able to tide over the situation as early as possible.
But this is not back to square one, isn't it, Dr. Raina? We have, it's not like back to the days of lockdown. We have people with a large number of people who have been vaccinated across the world. There is an availability of vaccinations and many are being produced. We have a greater understanding of this virus and its mutations. So, I mean, it's not like this is an unknown territory we are entering once again. Even with Omicron, we are far more prepared. And the point is that, you know, countries like, let's say the UK, for instance, they're saying, no way, we are not going to start locking down once again. We have to continue living. And they are going to offer a booster shot. So, I mean, how do you look at, you know, that kind of approach? Is that pragmatic or foolish?
Very true. This is not back to the lockdown timing. It's not that. We have much better awareness. We have much better understanding of the pandemic now. 2 years is enough of a time for giving us that understanding. But I would not like to adopt the UK strategy. UK has always had a flip-flop as far as the strategy was concerned. They were the first to ask that we will acquire immunity through infection, which was a wrong strategy, as also Sweden did that. We can't acquire immunity through infection. That is a compromise. Then they went into and said that we will remove masks, again a false strategy. And now they are saying that we would close down the economy and allow for booster shots. The best way is to use precautions wherever possible and at the most, at the limited level that are possible. For example, continue using masks, use good quality ventilation systems. When you go in public, ensure the fact that you are keeping the social distance. So we use these basic, but very stricter, very stringently enforced, and you can continue to open the economy. There is not a problem with that. UK is not an example to follow. India has a much better example to follow.
Fair enough. So let's look at India then. We are also talking about, you know, reaching a level of herd immunity. I mean, let's take Delhi, for instance, has, you know, a Sero survey says that 90% of the people have been exposed to the virus. So, I mean, that is some indication of some sort of herd immunity. What would you say, also the fact many people were saying that the virus is also already endemic. So, the defense that we've had against Delta as well as COVID-1, I mean COVID-19-1, that is basically the first form, original form that it came. Is that enough for us to be facing Omicron quite easily?
Mark, I am of the opinion that we shouldn't be talking of herd immunity as far as this pandemic is concerned. The concept of herd immunity originally arises from the fact that we have a population of, for example, 100 people, and all of them, or most of them, are immune to the disease. So that means that you have more than 90% of your population immune to the disease. Now, what your Sero survey says, that 90% of people in Delhi, for example, have antibodies. But are these antibodies persistent for a large period of time? Will they persist there for more than 2, 3 years, 4 years, the period of maximum impact of the pandemic? No, they won't last. The effect of antibodies itself wanes over a period of time. So you have a more dynamic group of people or dynamic immunity levels within a group of people. And the dynamic nature of the immunity in a group of people makes them vulnerable to infection. So you don't have a straitjacket closed system wherein you have 100 people which will move together with this immunity for a long period of time. Out of these 100 people, some will lose immunity maybe today, some will lose immunity maybe 15 days from now, some maybe 6 months from now. And most of these will be vulnerable to infection during that period of time. And Omicron is a new variant. It may not be the same as has happened in the past. So you may not have the same level of protection against Omicron, as we saw with Delta. So Delta, when Delta came, Delta became the most dominant form of infection across the world in a very short span of time. Compared to Delta, this is much faster. If you look at the South African context, for example, in South Africa, Delta became dominant in 6 weeks' time, but Omicron became dominant in 2 weeks' time. So it is faster spreading, fitter virus. So we may not have the entire immunity system available with us to tackle this. So please, we should not read much from Sero surveys and the concept of herd immunity.
Okay, so the question then comes to mind is that what is the best way forward? We have you did mention that, you know, Delta came in, and were there lots of reinfections that you did talk about our immunity, the antibodies, how long will they last? The question is, people have taken vaccinations also, they're worried how long will that last? So the issue is of reinfection. Do you think that this virus, is so different from the old that, whatever antibodies you've developed, if you've had COVID, those are gone. I mean, they're not, they can't defend you against the new virus.
Not entirely, not entirely this. So it may still be able to protect a few of us. It may not protect all of us, but it may still be able to protect us. The previous infections may still be able to protect us. Look, viruses have a biology which is not one-to-one. Viruses don't follow that one-to-one biology that if I have taken one, the one will save me. There is some level of difference as far as this infections happen in natural systems. So it will give us some immunity against this, or some people will be protected against this depending upon their own immune system and their interaction with the different types of viruses they have occurred, they have had in past. For example, somebody with a Delta may respond better to this, while others with a Delta may not respond that well.
And a final question, going back to the, the fact that there are 32 variations on the spike protein. Is it possible, that this is a human-made virus? May not be lab leak, but maybe even induced at a time, at a time when the world was beginning to get back on its feet?
Look, all of us are aware of the fact that there are around more than 10, 11 labs in the world which are into this amplification system or system of manipulating the viruses. All of us know of that. Tweaking a virus here and there and trying to see how exactly will they respond to the vaccine. So entirely ruling out the lab leak theory on a man-made virus will also be not prudent. But assigning a reason or finding out a scientific rationale for that is difficult at this point in time. I don't have many scientific evidences with me to classify it as a man-made virus because of the way that it has come up. It has come up from a country which has very good surveillance system and which doesn't follow the same protocols as others which fall as far as vaccine development is this virus research is concerned. So probably I won't attribute it to a man-made virus or at this point in time or a lab leak. But this is a mutation that may have happened on its own.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Raina, for your inputs and enlightening us on the subject. Moving on then to our next story. A 15-year-old boy went on a shooting spree in his school in Michigan, and he killed 3 fellow teens, a boy and 2 girls, before giving himself up and asking for legal defense. The case again raises this issue of gun control. Since guns are easily available and obtained, he got his from his father, but checks on the mental state of those in possession of them seem to be sadly bypassed.
Another shooting rocks the United States. This time the shooting took place at a high school in Oxford, Michigan. This shooting claimed at least 3 lives and injured 6 others. 3 students died in the shooting spree. A 16-year-old boy who succumbed to his wounds en route to a hospital in a patrol car, and 2 girls aged 14 and 17 lost their lives. The suspect, a sophomore at the school, was believed to have acted alone and was arrested without resistance after firing 15 to 20 shots.
So this touches us all personally and deeply, and will for a long time. This wound will never go away, and we understand that. But we also want the community to know that we're here for them, and we will leave no stone unturned in determining all the things that led up to it and making sure that this investigation is full and complete before it's turned over to hold this individual accountable.
U.S. President Joe Biden extended condolences to the families.
I was informed after the tour. I learned about a school shooting in Michigan. We learned, as we learned the full details, my heart goes out to the families enduring the unimaginable grief of losing a loved one. Apparently there were somewhere in the order of 9 people shot, and 3 I think are dead. And the young man, I think, as I understand it from staff, is about 15 years old, and he turned himself in and just said he claimed his right against self-incrimination and handed over his pistol. That's all we know about it, but you've got to know that that whole community has to be just in a state of shock right now.
The bloodshed unfolded around midday in Oxford, Michigan, about 40 miles north of Detroit, as terrified students and teachers taking cover inside. Of the 8 others struck by gunfire, 7 were students. 2 of them are hospitalized with gunshot wounds to the head. With Bureau Inputs, World Today Desk, DD India.
Hondurans have given themselves their country's first female president. Xiomara Castro is the wife of the former president Manuel Zelaya. And Castro is a leftist and had taken what has appeared to be an unassailable lead when reports last came in with half the votes counted. She defeated the ruling party candidate Nasri Asfura. Here are the details.
Xiomara Castro is all set to become Honduras' first female president. The ruling party presidential candidate Nasri Asfura has already conceded Sunday's election to his opposition rival.
I want to tell you that I met with Xiomara and her entire family today. I went to her house to personally congratulate her. Now I want to say it publicly. I congratulated her on her triumph and as president-elect. I hope that God enlightens her and guides her so that in her administration she does the best for the benefit of all of us Hondurans.
Leftist opposition candidate Xiomara Castro declared victory in November 28th Honduran presidential election, with early results giving her a commanding lead and putting her on track to become the first female leader of the Central American country. With just 40% of votes counted, Castro, the wife of former president Manuel Zelaya, had 53.5%, while Nasri Asfura, candidate of the ruling National Party, had 34%, according to preliminary results from the National Electoral Council. Castro was competing in a field of more than a dozen candidates.
Sadly, men have lost credibility after mismanaging corruption, abuse of power, personal ambition, leadership battles, and special interests. Today, history is being written in Honduras, and I think women should be proud of having a woman guiding a country marred by poverty and corruption.
Self-proclaimed democratic socialist in a country where the left has rarely been popular and few women hold public office, Castro has won the support of Hondurans tired of corruption and the concentration of power since 2009. Military rule, corruption, poverty and crime have rendered Honduras one of the least developed and most unstable countries in Central America. With Bureau Inputs, World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, the United States on Tuesday revoked the designation of the Colombian group, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, as a foreign terrorist organization, 5 years after it had reached a peace deal with the Colombian government. So the two dissident groups that have that had formed out of the FARC, that's the La Segunda, and the FRC-EP, they are the People's Army, they have been designated as foreign terrorist organizations, and the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said in a statement that the group no longer exists as a united organization that engages in terrorism. The decision will allow the U.S. government agencies like the Agency for International Development to work on peace implementation in parts of Colombia where demobilized FARC soldiers are located. The U.S. action was welcomed by the Colombian government. Also, in the 2016 peace accord, it ended the FARC's part in the Andean countries' decades-old internal armed conflict, which has left millions displaced and more than 260,000 dead. 14 people died on Tuesday in an Azerbaijani military helicopter crash that went down in the east of the Caucasus country during a training flight. 2 more were wounded as the result of a state border service helicopter crash. All of the victims were military servicemen. Earlier on Tuesday, according to the country's border service and prosecutor general, a military helicopter belonging to Azerbaijan's state service crashed in Garakhebat airfield in Kiziz region at approximately 10:40 a.m. while conducting a training flight. An investigation was underway into the accident's causes. The world's first living robot can apparently replicate itself. Scientists call these Pac-Man-like robots xenobots, as they are made from the stem cells of the Xenopus laevis, an African clawed frog. The implications of replication may lead to answers about how some creatures replicate or replace their limbs and other organs while others cannot.
Robots can reproduce. Yes, you heard it right. The world's first living robot is now able to replicate itself in a unique way.
Scientists have engineered what they say are the first self-replicating robots ever made from living cells, and they are the same researchers who unveiled last year world's first robots constructed entirely out of living cells. These scientists made the world's first computer-designed living robots, and now they claim that the Pac-Man shaped organisms are capable of self-replication.
In the first part of this study, we showed, first of all, that xenobots can self-replicate. It turns out that on their own, they're not very good at it. A swarm of 9 parent xenobots will produce 1 or 2 small, weak children that cannot push cells and cannot make grandchildren. So the process runs out of gas after 1 generation. We brought in the AI and we asked it to design a new set of 9 xenobots that would be more replicative, that would be able to produce children, which would produce their own children, and so on. And it turns out that in this case, the AI came up with a design that is much more replicative. And that design looks like a Pac-Man. It's a pretty simple circular object. It's got a little wedge cut out of it.
In the future, the xenobots could be used in medical applications, Bongard said, although any practical use would be strictly regulated because the cells come from animals.
There are some suggestions about what they could be useful for because they're very small. They're less than 1 millimeter across. So if you see these moving around in a petri dish, they look like moving poppy seeds. They're just visible to the human eye. So they're very small. They can get into places that more traditional robots couldn't get into. They're biodegradable. They're genetically unmodified. And they're also biocompatible. So it may be in the long term, we're able to create biobots from human cells. And they might actually have medical applications. You might be able to ingest one of these bots and have it do useful work inside the body. In the much more near term, it's probably going to be underwater applications.
About the size of poppy seeds, the tiny xenobots are designed by artificial intelligence and built from frog cells. The scientific team from the University of Vermont, Tufts University and Harvard University's Wyss Institute for Biologically Inspired Engineering discovered that the organisms are capable of finding and gathering hundreds of loose frog cells together to assemble xenobot children. The offspring can go on to reproduce themselves. Xenobots are robots made from the stem cells of the Xenopus leois, an African clawed frog. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, to discuss this interesting subject, we have with us Umakant Soni, who's the CEO of ArtPark, and he's the chairman of AI Foundry Robotics. Mr. Soni, just tell me, the fact is that how do we create biobots? I mean, we were thinking of AI, as robots, but suddenly now we are moving into the realm of cells, which are actually robots. This takes it to a different level, or is it already been happening for a long time?
No, I think that's an interesting and exciting progress for sure. Just to give you a brief perspective on this, while this kind of self-replication has been observed in molecules, I think for the organism, I think it's a new thing. And this could actually have potential applications for regenerative medicines. And that's why it is exciting. Having said that, trying to create living robots or bots that could work at really small scale, that has been going on for quite some time. Okay. In fact, at Indian Institute of Science, which is the promoter of ArtPark as well, we have Dr. Ambrish, who has been working on nanorobots as mobile nano tweezers, with which you can actually grasp things and move them around. And that also has a lot of interesting applications.
Okay. So the point is that in using it in for medical practice, the fact is that there are many diseases. Is it possible, for instance, they were talking, from what I have read, it's basically stem cell research, that you're going to talk about replicating organs. That's the first stage. The second stage would be also to counter perhaps the growth of cells which are like cancer cells and things like that. So this has a huge potential.
Absolutely, and I think when you talk about robots, we typically think of them as the, the metallic objects which move around, and typically what gets featured in movies. This kind of living robots is something new, and that's why it is also exciting that we could be probably looking at creating responsive robots from biological side as well. And however, having said that, this is still research and probably potentially some years away from practical applications.
So there's the question of the ethical domain as well. I mean, after all, how far can we go with this? I mean, the point is that are we going to create some super brains, for instance, that are vastly, above the normal intelligence? Are these kind of things possible? And, then what are we actually achieving at the end of the day?
I think definitely. I think one of the things that imagination points to is about some of these things which also get popularized by movies and popular fiction as well. However, having said that, it's still long. I mean, it's quite some time away, because what we're talking about and where we are potentially right now with AI and robotics is that we are trying to mimic human intelligence by looking at sensory intelligence, right? So we can see. With machines, and they can act on what they see or what they hear, or maybe we can talk to them. But those are still, very, very, early in terms of their intelligence. What we're talking about, typically what gets featured in movies is about, artificial consciousness and things like that, which basically exhibit awareness of intelligence. So we are like quite far away. We have not even managed to model, consciousness and things like that. They're still, quite some time away. We probably need, quantum machines to probably do that. Just model them biologically. I mean, forget about building them. So, I mean,
so in these particular bots, in the xenobots, for instance, as we heard the gentleman scientist who was there talking, he said that initially they were able to replicate, but they produced very weak offspring which could not produce grandchildren. And then they put in the AI, and then after that they were able to replicate, and they replicate quite easily, as you can see. So the question is now, if that amount of AI can be put into the cell to do something like that, I mean, the AI can always be advanced.
So definitely, I think in case of xenobots, they were able to replicate easily. That was one advantage of that. Having said that, they still cannot live outside of any lab and without any nutrition or energy sources. And they have very short lifespan. They die after only a few weeks. So of course, we can stretch the popular imagination, but realistically speaking, creating robots which will live forever or replicate themselves, it's still quite some time away. Of course, that that kind of imagination does get a lot of attention. But having said that, I think we have really practical usage for such kind of nanorobots. Or
so what is some of the usage then? What is some of the usage? Why is this such a big breakthrough?
It's quite promising.
Why is this such a big breakthrough? What is some of the uses that we can think about?
So I think this kind of like what we call a spontaneous, kinematic self-replication. I think this has been observed in molecules, but never have been observed in organisms, which are a lot more complex. And that's where it's kind of interesting, because this could be used for maybe scouring for radioactive waste, for clearing microplastics from the ocean, or to skipping plague from human arteries, maybe to even fixing electrical circuits. And so there are some of these applications. These are exciting ones. And I think if we are able to persevere with this and we make similar advancement, we could probably get to that. But yes, we are far away from replicating at human scale and intelligence. Maybe it still probably take 20, 30, 40 years easily, and we don't know what the pathway to that would look like as of now, realistically speaking.
So something you said just now struck a chord with me, I mean, about the plastic. So the issue of environmental degradation is taking place rapidly, and climate change is, upon us. So is this a method that we can, start investing in to try and reverse that to some extent, create perhaps, more greenery, to create cleaner oceans, cleaner water bodies, also perhaps cleaner air?
Yeah, I think that the cleaner air part looks really, really interesting and exciting to me here. And I think there are some applications, especially with nanorobots, that seems promising in that direction. Although this may not have direct application on that part.
Okay.
But yes, cleaning microplastics from ocean, that's a big challenge. And if these are successful at scale, maybe potentially that could be useful here. Also, another interesting and exciting the whole area of micro manipulation of these tiny particles, and like the one of the research that's actually happening at Institute of Science, where they're seeing if this can be used for interesting things like you actually have challenges in taking care of infections in your teeth, and
yes.
Could these nanobots be used for that?
Okay.
There is some exciting applications that we are seeing. And the replication perspective is exciting, because that means that you could actually have intervention that could go from small scale to little larger scale, and we hope that we can actually put it to use in terms of in things which could be beneficial to humankind.
Fascinating talking to you, Mr. Umakant Soni. Thanks very much for joining us and enlightening us on this subject. Then moving on then to our next story, let's turn the pages of history, see what's happening, what happened on this day. This is our segment called Today in History.
On the 1st of December in 1918, Iceland was proclaimed a sovereign state in full agreement with Denmark. The agreement recognized Iceland as a fully independent and sovereign state, the Kingdom of Iceland. On the very same day in the year 1934, Sergei Kirov, Communist Party leader and associate of Joseph Stalin, was assassinated at the headquarters of the party in Leningrad by a youth member of the party. On the same day in 1959, 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty in Washington. The treaty preserved the area for peaceful purposes and scientific research. And on this day in 1973, David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, passed away. He was in office from 1948 to 53 and again from 1955 to 63.
Well, today is World AIDS Day, and the theme of World AIDS Day 2021 is End Inequalities, End AIDS, with a special focus on reaching people left behind. WHO and its partners are highlighting the growing inequalities in access to essential HIV services. We leave you with this video, and thank you very much for watching World Today. Namaskar.